Sodom is being destroyed. Okay, had the world ever seen destruction?
Yes.
Absolutely. So there were two, I don't know if you're aware of this. Before the Great Flood, there was a mini flood. Did you know that?
No.
There was not a mini flood like, your bathtub flowed over. A mini flood, like a third of the world was destroyed by water. So what do you think the perfect response to that would have been? What would the response be today? If there was a terrible natural disaster such as that, how would the world respond? What?
I was going to say coming to people's aid.
Yeah, coming to people's aid. Would that have been the right response then? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Everything that was wrong with the world before the flood had to do with the world having entered a place where people took on the mentality of taker and not giver. So that could have worked. Okay? How do people actually respond to natural disasters? Are they always very helpful?
No.
No, and that's how the world responded then. Okay. What? Israel helps everyone. It's so crazy when you look at the proportion of aid that they give to things to countries that have no diplomatic relationships with us. But in any case, okay. So now, when Lot saw this terrible destruction, what could he have done? What are some possibilities? Okay, fire, brimstone, the whole area of all 5 boroughs of Sodom were like, you could see vapor rising from the earth. I have to tell you something funny. In Israel, in Yerushalayim, it may snow in the winter. So, but people aren't prepared for it, even though it does snow every year almost. But people, so everything closes down and it's very, there's this much snow on the floor and everybody's so the man who runs, Eli, it wasn't Eli with that, it was somebody else, but the man who runs the physical plant of Neve went into the kitchen and he told the kitchen workers to put out salt so people could walk up to the building. Okay, so what do you see? This Arab with the salt shaker. Okay, Okay, so no, taking out the hose to save stone did not work. No. Tell me other responses.
Pray.
Pray. Totally not in the picture. Okay, he had the opportunity to escape. Guests were sent in. They told him to escape. He told his family. Did they want to go with him? No. Not really. So he had to leave behind his engaged daughters, his married daughters. He only took his 2 single daughters and his wife. His wife made the wrong response. What response did she make? Do you know?
Turn back.
But besides, why do you think she was told don't look back?
Signifying wanting to go back.
Yeah, so her looking back could have come from 3 different places. One is how could I help, which was irrelevant. Another was look what came about, look what these deeds did. And the third was these innocent people, look what's happening. Okay, so if she was looking back with identification to them, for her it would have been a disaster. Now for Avraham, looking at them was not a disaster at all. It was expected, and that's what he did. He bargained for their lives. For her, it was problematic. Why do you think it was problematic for her? Well, it wasn't problematic for Avraham. It was moral and expected. So I have to tell you a midrash that unlocks it. So their rescue worked as follows. God sent messengers to Lot, just as he did to Avram, for the sake of hospitality. They had to go through a back alley because it was so bad to invite guests in Sodom. Okay, they get there. The people found out they were there. How did they find out? The wife. She told people. How did she tell people? Do you know? So Lot told her to make supper. She decided she was out of salt. So she went to the neighbor and said, he brought guests. I have enough salt for us. But, he's crazy. Okay, you understand this? And that's how people knew. Then what happened?
They all came to the door.
And?
They tried to come in.
And what was their intent?
To kill them?
No. They said to Lot, and this is an important part of the story in understanding why she shouldn't look back. They said, give us the guests. They didn't want to harm Lot at this point. They wanted to harm the guests. You came to us, you broke our laws, you're trying to steal our wealth. Okay? We'll deport you. No. Oops, sorry, that was the latest path. Okay. They wanted to make them an example for any future people who might come to Sodom. They were going to rape them homosexually. So what did Lot say by way of response, which tells you all the complications of Lot's character? Take my daughters. Okay, clear? So on one hand, you have Lot offering his house to guests, taking an incredible risk, right? Which he learned from Avraham. God's the creator, he's the host of the world. You have to give expression to your spiritual self. But when it came to basic morality, he wasn't there. So Ramban talks about this, and he says something very profound. He says a normal person does not do that, right? You don't offer your daughters to the mob. People will die rather than have their daughters grabbed by the mob, right? It shows that he saw women as sexual objects anyway. This is how he saw women. Okay? It says his own eye was upon his daughters. Okay, where does that come from other than physical desire? It comes from still having the mentality of a taker. So I want to tell you something. All promiscuous societies in which women are randomly exploited, are taker societies. Could you see where this is so? So his wife, Lot's wife, was certainly smitten with the same sort of mentality. Oh, he bought Saul. Okay. So she looked back because she still identified with them. It wasn't save them, they're still redeemable. It's I'm them. How is this happening? So for her, this was a disaster. Why? Because she didn't deserve to be saved any more than they deserved to be saved. Now, the vehicle of her doom was salt. There's a halacha concerning salt, that all of the sacrificial offerings had to have salt placed upon them. And the words that's used in the text are, it's a covenant of salt. Okay, so there's some properties of salt that are very interesting. Tell me something interesting about salt.
It absorbs water.
It absorbs water, yeah?
It never goes bad.
It doesn't go bad.
Yeah.
That's why you can call it a covenant. Even if you make it wet, virtually everything else, once it's wet, it biodegrades. Salt doesn't. Okay, so there's something eternal about salt. So seeing the world as a place in which there's a thread of eternity woven through the fabric of the world has two faces. One face is, and therefore I will live for things that are going to be there eternally. The other is, I think that there are things in the world that will make me safe eternally, irrationally. So I want you to think about how people relate to money. Are there people who relate to money as though they'll have it forever? Yeah. Okay. So every so often, I remember just last year, there was this major financial scandal involving a state senator from New York. And I saw his pictures in the news. From his appearance, he certainly wasn't much less than 70, maybe more. Why is he embezzling at the age of 70? What's he thinking? He earns a salary, a very good salary. He's a state senator. He's been a state senator for years. He no doubt has savings and investments. What is he thinking? Is he going to be able to, is he going to live to 120? Probably not. 110? Probably not. 100? Probably not. What age do people live to?
80.
They live to mid-80s, depending on where you live in the world. Okay, whatever. But in America it would be maybe 84. Yeah? He looks at least 70. Does he have enough money to live comfortably the rest of his life without embezzling?
Yeah.
Yes. So why is he embezzling? Put it into words.
Because
What's this money going to buy him?
happiness.
He has, again, he's making a good salary.
He probably has a mentality like that there's not enough. So
He had, good.
So he's just
Good. So you have this. There's what they call scarcity mentality. Do you know how that goes? Okay, so it's sometimes rational, but a lot of the times it's irrational. You have this subconscious equation. X, in this case money, makes me happy, so there could never be enough of it. So the fact that he won't live to spend the money he embezzled, that's not going to happen, becomes irrelevant. Okay, clear? So people treat money as though it's eternal because they want security, and you can't buy security, and everyone knows this intellectually. Most people don't know it emotionally. This makes sense to you? So even very good people fall victim to this. Could you see where this is so? So the woman who was my babysitter when my children was young was an extraordinary woman. She was a wonderful woman. But here she was in her early 80s. She had a severe heart condition. She was living in a facility. I still remember showing her, online, ads that were taken, printed off the computer. She wanted to buy a new clothes dryer because the one that she has isn't it's not top of the line anymore. So I helped her buy it, but where's the irrationality there?
Hers still worked.
Hers still is perfectly functional. Okay, she doesn't live at home. Remember this. She's living in a facility. She's unlikely to ever go home again in her life, which she didn't. But the equation, this will give me a feeling of freedom, security. Okay, it's engraved. So when Lot's wife turned back, she turned into a pillar of salt. Not just because, wow, she went and asked for salt and so she turned into salt, but because the fact is she was a pillar of salt. You understand this? She was somebody who was totally invested in her own false sense of eternity. So now Lot is trying to escape. The angels who came to him in the guise of human visitors told him to go to the mountains. Go head for the hills. Okay, yeah? He didn't want to go there. Do you know why?
He was scared that he wouldn't survive.
He had to run somewhere. Who lived in the hills? When he separated from Avram, Avraham was living in the hills. So he had this equation. In Sodom, I'm a tzaddik. Next to Avram, I'll be what? I'll be garbage. Okay, do people think like this? So I want to talk to you about the discomfort we feel when we're together with people who are on a higher level. Did you ever experience that discomfort? Okay, so let's say in the dining room, the girls from one of the Frum seminaries begin schmoozing with you. Could that happen?
Yes.
Okay, they do. They're nice. Okay, and let's say one of them invites you to her house for Shabbos. Gosh, my parents are here, and they rented a place right in Har Nof, and why don't you come? You'll have a great time. And you go to her house, and all of the girls are wearing Frum Shabbos uniform. You know what I mean? Yeah. You tell me what she's wearing. Come on, describe it. What's Frum Shabbos uniform?
Like a shirt under the shirt.
A shirt under the shirt. What kind of skirt?
Like a skirt under a dress.
Okay.
Black on black.
What?
Black on black.
Black on black. Okay. A bubble skirt, but with black tights, high heels. You have the whole look?
Yeah.
And what's her mother wearing?
The same thing.
The same. What's her older sister wearing? Same. What's the 2-year-old baby wearing? You ever saw babies wearing Frum clothes? They do. They dress them up little black tights and a velvet dress and a nice bow. And they're very cute, but their 20-year-old sister could be wearing the same outfit. You got it? Okay, got this? And then the father comes in. What's he wearing?
A suit.
A suit.
Penguin.
He's wearing penguin. What's the 19-year-old brother wearing?
Penguin.
Penguin. The 15-year-old. 14. 13. Okay. The 3-year-old boy is the only one who breaks the mold. Okay, clear? He's not wearing penguin or a black dress. Okay, you have this? Could you picture feeling uncomfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Put into words, where's the discomfort coming from?
You feel different. You feel like an outcast.
Okay, so not just different, but outcast. Could you see this?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just different. So this is not good. Got this? This is not good. When you see somebody who's in a different place, you're on this level, they're on that level, that should make you feel comfortable, not uncomfortable. For the reason why it would have been good for Lot to move near Avram. Why would it have been good? Comfortable it wouldn't have been. Why would it be good? We established this in an earlier class. Is everybody influenced by their environment?
Yeah.
Everyone. And therefore, it's good to choose an environment that makes you a little uncomfortable. Move up a little bit. Suffer the discomfort. Stay yourself. Don't buy penguin. But it's good to broaden your horizons both ways, because from the world we certainly have our horizons broadened in the other way. So if you go to your cousins in Tel Aviv, what are they? No, whatever, whatever. What, if anything, are they wearing? No. Okay, so it's good to have the influence at least take you to two different directions. Lot was afraid of this. Okay, clear? He ended up going into a cave. Why was there wine in a cave? Okay, why did the daughters think, like, why on earth would they want to get their father drunk and sleep with them? And finally, what was the outcome of this deed? Okay, why was there wine in the cave? So the Talmud very cryptically says, when God created the world, he made wine in the cave. Okay, this isn't meant to be taken literally. What does it mean? Maharal explains. When God created the world, he gave the properties of beautiful, good, prospering vineyards to be near that cave. So invariably, people will end up storing wine in that cave. It was a setup. Okay, why? So now I'm taking you all the way to the end of the story, because Mashiach is meant to come. What? Okay, so let's hear how this works and then understand why. So there's wine stored in the cave. What were the two daughters thinking?
That there's no more people in the world.
They thought this was the end of the world. Now remember, the flood was still very, very deeply engraved in their memory. So they remembered the mini flood, the greater flood. They knew this could be the world's destruction. So keep the image. I want to tell you a statistic I just read this morning. Okay, the birth rate of Arabs and Jews in Israel, are they the same or different? What do you think? What would you say? What would the difference be? Who has more children per couple?
Arabs.
Okay, that's how it was until this year. This year it evened out. Okay, so now, right now, both Jews and Arabs in Israel have 3.3 children per couple. Okay, which means that means that some people will have 7, some people have 1, but the average ends up 3.3. Okay, people there are a lot of jokes about like that. You know, the odds are you should be Chinese. Why? Because statistically, the majority of people in the world. Okay, whatever. But so why aren't you Chinese anyway? But so that meant the Arab birth rate went way down. Not that long ago, they were having 7 children per couple, and the Jewish birth rate is going up. Not long ago, they were having 1.3 children per couple, and now they're up to 3. This is a big jump. Okay, so why am I telling you this? Why do people have children?
Sure.
What's the reason? Many of you would want to have a child, get married and have a child, yeah?
Continue future generations to pass on.
Okay, so one is you want continuance. Is that the only reason?
No, you want someone to love unconditionally.
Oh, you want to love unconditionally. You want someone to receive everything you are. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other reasons? So when Planned Parenthood became a big name in world consciousness, why did they tell people, you're really having children for this reason, and that's like an invalid reason. Why don't you plan your families? What reason did they think people were having, or did they? What?
Because they were selling the abortion body parts. So
Okay.
they're making money off of people getting an abortion.
Okay. That's what they were doing, but the way they would sell it, did you know that that was happening? Okay, I'm not saying that this was their motivation necessarily, but that was happening by some unscrupulous people, and it's still done in China, by the way. But they would say, in earlier times, you needed more people to work on the farm, you needed more hands. Today, every child you have is limiting your financial reality and making your ability to enjoy life and be yourself smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, you could see this? Where did they buy into this? No, where in the world did people accept, yeah, that's right, and reduce in America? The birth rate went down drastically. Where didn't it work? In Israel it worked initially also, with their first getting out of it now.
Is there Planned Parenthood in Israel?
No, I mean, anybody who wants birth control pills could buy it in the drugstore without a prescription.
No, not birth control, but an abortion.
Abortions? It's in theory, abortion is illegal. In practice, it's done. Okay. In fact, I'll spare you all of this. It's very easy to get an abortion, but you have to have a doctor's involvement. But in any case, the reason I'm asking you is in India it didn't work. Did you know this? Why do you think it didn't work in India, where people really are poverty-stricken?
Because they're so used to it.
So, and in China it was a hard sell, a very hard sell. It had to be done by force. In societies that are less consumeristic, they don't want birth control because they don't equate having more money with more pleasure, because they haven't had the experience of having more money. They equate more people with more pleasure, more people to love, more people in your life. So it didn't successfully sell in India ever. India still has a high birth rate. And in China, they sold it by force. Do you know what the consequences were, by the way, in China?
Secret kids.
It's shidduch paradise. So the reason for this is that they give very severe penalties for having more than 2 children. And what they idealize is 1 child. So if you just have 1 child, you have all of these financial benefits. So because of what Chinese culture is, what gender do they want? Boys. So if they have a girl, what happens?
They kill it.
Yeah, there's infanticide in China. Not just, so there were whole villages where there were no women. Okay? So as I said, it's shidduch paradise. You don't have to be beautiful. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be, you just have to be female. Okay? But,
I got this.
okay, so this is whatever. So why did Lot's daughters want children so badly? What do you think? I gave you several paradigms of why a person would want children. What do you think they were thinking? So they got their father drunk, and the oldest daughter slept with him. That this wasn't physically an easy thing to pull off either, you realize. Getting someone that drunk but still aware somewhat. Okay. So she gave birth to a child, and she named the child Moav. Do you know what Moav means? What does the word Abba mean? Means from father. That's a terrible name to give a child. That's like naming somebody incest. Okay. The second daughter followed the example of the first, but she named her child Ammon. Okay, what's the word Am? What does that mean? Nation. Ammon means of my nation, which is a much more refined way of saying the same thing. Okay, now, if we stop the movie here, remember we said God put the wine there on purpose from the days of creation. Does that look like this is what God wants?
Yeah, he wants it.
He wants it, that's what it looks like, which we know he doesn't want since he forbade it. So I want you to keep this image. This is a very important image for you to keep for understanding reality. If you stop the movie in the middle, you don't know its resolution. So that means oftentimes in your own life, something will happen that's incomprehensible and feels unjust. But you're looking at page 310. You don't know what happened on page 1, and you don't know what's going to happen in page 800. So yes, when you look at the world in an isolated way, you will find things that can't be justified. So I'm going to give you another example of this. You know the Yosef story, right? Yes, no? So Yosef was Yaakov's son. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. We'll be learning it in Parshat later. He's sold to a man whose wife tried to seduce him because he was very good looking. He ran away from her. She claimed he raped her, and he's in prison. Now, if you were him, and you're about to be sentenced, and this is an Egyptian court and you're a slave, could you picture yourself praying?
Mm-hmm.
And when they gave him a life sentence, would you feel your prayers were answered or not answered? Not answered. Life imprisonment in an Egyptian prison that's called the bore, the pit. You were doing the right thing. You took yourself out of a situation of immorality, and this is what happens. So could you picture being angry at God and extremely embittered?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the end of the Yosef story? Do you know? While he was in prison, he became an interpreter of dreams. Later, Paro had a dream. He interpreted it. He makes him his viceroy. He becomes the most important person in Egypt. There's a famine. He saves his whole family. The Jews come. Got the picture? So if he could see page 810, when he was sentenced, he would say, okay, this is a step along the way. But nobody could see that. Okay? So God allowed this incest to happen. Now let's look at the historic results of this. Okay, so these two children, Moab and Ammon, eventually become entire nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites. They grew up with the tendencies you would expect them to grow up with given their beginnings. They came from people who saw the world as a consumer treat. They were into taking. They became two nations that were known both for their cruelty and for their promiscuity. Why is cruelty sometimes part of a promiscuous society? The first step in being able to exploit someone is distancing from them emotionally. Could you see where this is so? Okay, the word for cruel in Hebrew is achzar, which is a combination of two words, ach meaning only, and zar meaning a stranger. If you could exploit someone, you could turn them into a stranger. And if you could turn them into a stranger, you could be very cruel. So these are nations that became known for their promiscuity and their cruelty. Okay, time passes. Okay, there's a Moabite ruler who, guess what, was known for his what and what? Okay, his name was Eglon. Okay, this is good for you, Judaica trivia. And what was the name of? Okay, yeah. Okay, he waged war against Israel together with a confederation of other kings. Okay, one of the leaders of Israel actually murdered him. It's like the whole story of the murder is very interesting. And his daughter had choices in front of her. Be Eglon's daughter. What are the choices you have? What's the choices that anybody who grows up in an extremely dysfunctional, negative reality has? They have only two choices. Their reality negates other choices.
They either have to stay and continue in that way, or remove themselves.
Exactly. As one of the great leaders of the civil rights movement said, you're either on the bus or off the bus. Okay, so Ruth chose to develop herself in direct opposition to what she saw around her. In the meantime, back in Israel, okay, so here's Ruth in inner turmoil. One of the great leaders of the time who was very righteous and good, but who failed, was a man called Elimelech, okay? So Elimelech is wealthy, powerful, righteous, anything you could want in a leader. There's a famine. Elimelech leaves Israel because he was uncomfortable with being a wealthy man in the midst of a famine. Why would that make him uncomfortable? Think about how you feel when you go to the kotel and they converge on you. Do you know who I mean? Who converges on you when you go to the kotel sometimes?
The girls who are sneeze police.
The tznius police, or there's possibility. That's possibility one. What's another possibility?
The people were asking for money.
Okay. The people who are asking for contributions, tzedakah, and you feel like saying, leave me alone. Is it about money that you're saying, leave me alone?
No.
Let's say you gave every single one of them a half shekel. How much would you lose?
5 shekels.
Maybe 5 shekels, maybe less. Is that going to change your life at all?
No.
No, but you feel drained. Could you feel like you're draining me, like leave me alone? Okay, so that's because we equate giving with losing, because in a material sense that's true. Materially, whenever you give anything to anybody at all, you've lost something. You learned that when you were in Gan, right? If you have 2 cookies and you give away 1. Now you only have 1. If you give that away, now you have no, whatever. The more materialist you are, the more afraid of giving you are. Okay. So it's normal. This is completely normal. So Elimelech left Israel because even a wealthy man can't support an entire nation in the midst of a famine. He went to live in Moab, which was a terrible mistake. But he had justifications. His son married out. He married a Moabite woman. Who do you think he married? Ruth. So for her, this was a move up. It exposed her to alternative possibilities of living. Tim, it was a move down. He was marrying out. Okay, he dies. Okay, the mother of the family, Naomi, wants to come back to Israel. Ruth goes with her. When she goes with her, what's her future? Remember, she's a Moabite princess. What's she going to encounter in Israel?
Maybe still famine. Maybe
The famine was over.
she's not going to have like those same luxuries. She'll probably be in some
Luxury, she has nothing. She has no land, no servants, no nothing. She has Naomi, who's a penniless widow, okay? No security, no future. And she had a great deal of prejudice that people had against Moabites. So being introduced as, I'm from Moab, that's not a calling card to anything. So skipping a whole important part of this story, she ends up trying to support herself and her mother-in-law by gleaning in fields. She's seen by a man called Boaz, who was a truly great and righteous person. He marries her. Why he marries her again is a whole story. And they have a child. Okay, their child's name is Oved. Any of you have any idea of what the word Oved means? Work. What kind of, wealthy man, young woman, what kind of work are we talking about here? A servant of God. He has a son called Yishai, who has a son called David. Okay, clear? So what you have, let's go back to the cave. The wine in the cave was put there by God, who could see all the way to the end of the book. So the David come from this kind of a background. Now your question obviously is, why does David have to come from this repulsive act of incest? So I want to tell you why. We measure greatness, and God measures greatness, but we have different means of measurement. We humans measure greatness by achievement. Okay, we'll say, this is a great person, look what they achieved. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
God measures greatness by how far you got from where you began. So if you have somebody whose beginning point is here, and they move till here, they're not that great a person compared to somebody whose beginning point is here, and they move to here. So even though we'll see this person as less accomplished than that person, they moved further. This is clear? So the greatness of David is what his ancestry was, where he could have been and what he chose to become. Okay, this is clear? Mashiach will come from David. What's Mashiach's role in the world? To get people from wherever they are, whatever their beginning point is, and to bring forth the holy potential in them. That's what Mashiach's role in the world is. Okay, clear? So this has to come from that. It has to come from that. Okay, so now, as I told you, we're going to be doing the Akedah tomorrow. Remember to bring Chumashim. The Akedah is going to show you an entirely different perspective. Today we learned about the incest leading to salvation. What we're going to learn about is a whole different approach, which is where people who are on a high level bring about salvation. So there are two different paths. We learned one path today, we'll learn another path tomorrow. So that's it for now.